sure to check out all of the sponsors of the Shuffle Squad, whether you're looking for graded cards, you're looking for singles, sealed. We have all affiliate codes with all of our great sponsors, so be sure to check them out in the description below. Thank you so much for supporting us.
How's it going, everyone? It's PJ here on the Shuffle Squad, and we are going to be bringing you another meta discussion, but this time it's for the 23-24 season. The beginning of the season is here, and we are getting prepped for our first regional event. We're going to be heading over to Pittsburgh and playing in this giant event. It's the biggest so far that we've ever seen as far as North American regionals go. So I'm really excited. I have my lovely guest Tyler here on this awesome meta discussion video, and we're going to be going over all the decks that we've been playing and what we think about the expected meta game for that tournament, and how we're going to shape up on our end as far as the team goes and what we're expected to play against versus everybody else that's there. So here we go. We're going to pop over. You already know me here if you've been watching the channel, but Tyler, do you want to introduce yourself and kind of list off some of your accomplishments where people might know you from?
Sure. I played Pokemon like competitively mostly from 2008 to 2014. I won like a state championship and got second at two during that time period. I got a few placements at regionals. I think top four being my highest, but I quit around 2014 and to play other games like mostly WoW and poker professionally. I finished like Magic arena seasons, like ranked number 2 in limited and number 4 in constructed. I've generally just been playing other games, but at a high level, and started playing Pokemon again this year.
Awesome, very cool. And I know that currently playing into the season, you're ranked what in the top 10, I believe, for North American so far.
Something like that. Like fluctuating in the like 5 to 25 range,
Awesome.
but like it's real early season, so it's not like
Gotcha.
yeah, those aren't like solidified rankings or anything. Things will change quite rapidly with regionals.
Gotcha. So just so you know, we've got some numbers to back up what we're about to be talking about here on this video on the Shuffle Squad's channel. But to get into everything, I know I'm really excited about playing, and we really want to go over some of the highly played decks, what we're expected to see. So the first thing I'm going to ask you, Tyler, what are the top 3 most played decks that you think we're going to see at this Pittsburgh Regionals?
Probably like Lost being number 1, and like Guardy and Lost Sandbox like turbo variants, whether it's Kyogre or not Kyogre. As the top 3, I think Lostina will be the highest meta share, and the Guardy and like turbo Lost Sandboxes will be fairly even meta share wise.
Oh yeah, I mean, Guardy is obviously a popular deck too, and that's something I want to spend a little time on because I do think Guardy is really well posed versus a lot of the meta, but honestly, Lost Zone boxes, specifically Turbo Lost Zone box, really takes those out of, I think, day one conversions a lot of the time because you have those sniping effects or the damage counter placements, things like that, that Guardy really struggles with on, again, the day ones, the inexperienced players, the non-pro players where the conversion rate doesn't necessarily follow through into day 2. But I do think, yeah, you're right. Any sort of Lost Zone box deck, anything with a Comfy or 4 Comfies, Colress's Experiment, anything like that, we're going to see a ton of in day 1. So I think that definitely those are up there. I would almost say that we're probably going to see a really good percentage in day 1 of Mew VMAX too. That's another one I'm assuming that we'll see a lot of players, whether they're new, because the tournament is so huge. I think that we're at somewhere around the 1,800 Masters mark, which is absolutely crazy. Between 16 and 18, which is insane for me. I know I played through
near NIST numbers.
Exactly. So to play at a tournament that big, we're going to see a lot of newer faces in the Pokemon TCG, as well as people that saw the World Championships. They saw the winner of the World Championships play Mew VMAX. The winner beat Toward on stream here, and so that's probably going to be another one of the highly played decks, I would assume, outside of what we've already talked about. So that kind of transitions well over into what we've been preparing with. Tyler, I know you and I have been talking about quite a few decks on what we're going to be playing and what we've been playing at Cups and Challenges, so on and so forth. So what are some of the decks that you've been preparing with, and also some of the decks you've been preparing the matchups against?
Like the number one deck that like we've been working on and been playing for the most part, and like luckily, but I'll end up playing for Pittsburgh is like Lost Antina.
Mm-hmm.
I think just in general, like it's a fairly safe deck. It doesn't have like very many matchups or any really that are like you're really dreading when you play. Like at worst, you're like a 40-60, like for the most part, unless it's something really like me, like offbeat and like tailor made to beat Tina somehow. Like I feel like none of your matchups are worse than a 40-60 for the most part, even if you're like not attacking for it at all. Um, I think it takes a stronger Mew matchup than people think it does, even without attacking for Mew like whatsoever. I think you have several lines to winning that game reasonably.
Yeah.
Um, it just takes strong matchups into RCS decks, which always have a higher meta share like at regionals level events than they do at like locals and like online events. I think people are less likely to play this type of decks in smaller events because like online they're looking to more like maybe they're being competitive, but they're also looking to have fun, and I don't really think they probably find playing RCS very enjoyable. And like in a local setting, you might see some people playing Arceus, but like also like I think at cups and challenges, like people are more willing to like err on the side of like having more fun than playing maybe what they interpret the best play for them. Um, so Arceus like always has like underrepresentation like online and locally. So I would expect a little more Arceus than like, you've seen. Although I don't think Arceus in general is like very good at the moment. I think the best variant probably is like Artina, and Artina is like just like not very good. It's like
Yeah.
almost like Lostina in a way, except it just like has worse matchups overall.
I would agree with that too, and I think that the worst part about playing an Arc deck in general is that path is so huge in the meta right now. And
Yeah,
yeah, if you just don't find an out, because it's not like NAIC was, where everyone who is playing an Arceus deck is generally playing something that's got a path to the peak counter like Lost Cities. Whereas that's kind of fallen out of where the meta stands currently. If you want to play a good Arceus deck, it's probably going to have Path to the Peak in there. But if you get pathed before you're able to get off your V-Star attack, it really is a down or an uphill battle to get to where you need to go to win
yeah.
those matchups.
Like and like some of the lists are playing like one vacuum or like one random other stadium. And like if you're getting path, it's like you're not reliably drawing into that in time. The only way to like have a reliable path bump is like pumpkin.
Oh yeah.
And it just like kind of puts you in an awkward spot. It's like to retreat and 60 HP and
Yeah.
like making a spot for pumpkin in your deck too. I don't know.
I
It's
think
just
you and
not
I
very
were kind of going back and forth on Pumpkin in deck. And for those who don't know at home, Pumpkaboo is the card that we're talking about. This 60 HP tiny little Pokemon that you can put onto your bench and that gets rid of a stadium card. Now, the biggest problem with Pumpkaboo that we came up with is that Echoing Horn is also a pretty big card in this meta. I know it's something that I've tried to tech around to make sure that nobody can Echoing Horn me. So if you've got a Pumpkaboo and it's a small 60 HP Pokemon that maybe Sableye can plant damage on, or maybe an Inteleon VMAX can put some damage counters and then you get Yoga Looped again, that's the problem that we're seeing, is that it's an issue in more decks than it's helpful. And I think that that's something that you're going to have to find some sort of out if you are playing an Arc deck like that.
Yeah, 60 HP is just it's a really exploitable number for like both Lost Zone Box and Rapid Strike, which both play Horn,
Mhm.
so I can exploit it multiple times. And like I do think Rapid Strike is never going to have an extremely high meta share,
Mhm.
but it's always going to be a relevant play.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of top players at the moment seem to be leaning towards liking Rapid Strike. So like I would expect like maybe the meta share isn't that high day one, but like day two, like you're more likely than not to play at least one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, uh, and then like kind of back to the Lost Tina, I think the main reason that like it's just kind of the play for us at the moment at least is just like it kind of plays all the best cards in the format. Like I think Giratina is probably the best attacker straight up. I
Yeah.
think like Sableye is like the best like finishing Pokemon. I think Path to the Peak is incredibly strong.
Mhm.
I think Path to the Peak with hand disruption is incredibly strong. Um, like tech things like Snorlax,
Mhm.
incredibly strong. It's like the deck's kind of tight. You don't have a lot of tech spots, but there are some interesting techs you can play. Like
Yeah.
you have one or two spots to like mess around with. It's just like feels like a deck that plays all the best cards in the format. Um, so it's like there's like a reasonable chance you win any game just because like you have the best cards.
Exactly. I mean, it's some of the best attacks in the game. There's literally a delete attack. So Giratina obviously has been pretty big on the table, not only for us, but the remainder of the Shuffle Squad as well. Going kind of between that and Rapid Strike. And I know that you stated you'll probably see one throughout the tournament, especially day one. There's got to be somebody out there playing it because Lost Box is such a huge play for this tournament. And I think that we had all kind of tested Rapid Strike. Obviously, Cyrus, she was doing well, won NAIC, still doing well in kind of what we call the off season before these regional events began. Didn't end up playing it for Worlds, but Alex Szymanski did pick up the deck, added in some UV Max techs into the list. Didn't seem like that helped out too much to get a top 8 or top 4 spot, but still was able to make it into top 16, which is a huge accomplishment for any sort of Worlds competitor, to say the least. But I do think that Rapid Strike has been a deck to test, or at least know how to play against in this metagame, for sure. Would you say that for most players who aren't playing Tina, or in our case, a good Tina list, do they struggle against Rapid Strike? Should you know how to play against that deck?
I think it's a matchup that's like much closer than people think it is. Uh, Obviously, like, Rapid Strike just like destroys like regular Lost Zone builds because they really don't have any bulky Pokemon. They're bulky Pokemon they don't want to really put into play against Rapid Strike very often. Whereas Tina, it's like your board is a lot more bulky. Um, you can like go the route of just like if you open like Giratina, just playing down Manaphy and like Abyss Seeking for all your Lost Zone cards. It's like you're not on that heavy of a clock if you're not benching a lot of single price Pokemon. Um, so I mean like you can also go like Comfy Manaphy and just like set it normally
Mm-hmm.
and still have a pretty like strong shot into it. But like you have like multiple routes to like beating that deck, and you're not as heavy of a clock as other Lost Box decks are, just because you have bulkier Pokemon
Right.
like Giratina itself, and like in some cases like Snorlax.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to fill up your board with like 80 HP stabilize and just comfies.
Exactly. I think online for like my personal record, just playing on PTCG Live, I'm like 9-0 versus the deck, because finding that route, you're right, you do have Snorlax and a lot of the better builds that I've seen out there where you can just get rid of Luminion if it's out there. You can use your V-Star against their V-Max Pokemon, and now you're down to one prize card. You end the game with Sableye on their Octillery, and that's pretty much it. You just win the game after that, just because you've lost zoned enough cards that you don't necessarily have to put your liabilities down when you don't need to. And I think that that's the biggest thing going into that matchup as a Tina player. But for a lot of other matchups, you know, just like you were saying, with a regular Lost Zone box, unless they've got some kind of crazy tech against Rapid Strike specifically, you know, if a Lost Box player just puts Path to the Peak in, a lot of the times it can save you to stop Alakazam from working or the Inteleon to work. But I don't think we've really seen too many Lost Zone box decks that play techs like that. And also Gardevoir is a pretty bad matchup, or it's bad into a Rapid Strike player for sure, because if you don't get your Pokemon set up in time, they're all getting wiped out and possibly Yoga Looped because they're pretty small Pokemon, small HP Pokemon too.
It can be an awkward matchup. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely in Urshifu's favor.
Right.
Like no doubt about that. But it can end up being awkward for Urshifu if you start like Urshifu or
Oh
like
yeah.
something else undesirable like that because of the psychic weakness.
Mm-hmm.
It's like in that matchup you really don't want to be benching Urshifu unless
Right.
like you're gonna Yoga Loop and then attack with Urshifu then in the game the following turn.
Exactly.
Um, because like if you like you really want to be playing more like Inteleon box.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not getting there, if you're not getting your waters, getting your Inteleons out early, it can get really sketchy. If you start with like Metacham or like Rapture Urshifu, it can get kind of awkward. But it's definitely in general like very much in Rapid Strike's favor.
Mm-hmm.
Like and like also like Guardy's tie rate is just like incredibly high. So even if you do have a game where you just like throw against Guardy, it's like well not throw necessarily, but like just like have a bad start.
Right.
Like you are like more likely to like either be able to force a tie or get the win rather than like outright losing the series because you are favored in those other two games.
Exactly.
Um, so like that's a matchup I'll say is heavily in Urshifu's favor.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about Alex's like world list with Giacomo and Spiritomb, I'm actually not quite sure how effective that is against Mew itself, but like it
Mm-hmm.
actually is incredibly effective against Lugia. Um, between like Trample Minion
Right.
and discarding like either V Guard or Gift when it's incredibly relevant, like
Mm-hmm.
to boot, like it actually quite impactful in those scenarios. And it also like obviously does help the Mew matchup. But like I think it's even stronger in the Lugia matchup if you choose to play that combo.
Honestly, I think that, you know, we were working on a couple of lists ourselves going into early testing for this, where we had Path to the Peak and Spiritomb, and that was coincidentally a really good tech for Lugia, right? It would just happen to beat it because, you know,
Yeah.
Mew can't get around both at the same time usually. And it's pretty weird when it does happen. And Lugia usually has a hard time getting both of their Archeops into the discard pile without playing Burnett. And that's what we've seen because the consistency level hasn't gone up for Lugia. That's Lugia's biggest problem, and especially once you put Path down and you're pathing them turn one, possibly they can't put their Squawkabilly EX out. Now they're not going to be able to Luminion without getting rid of that path. And if you have Spiritomb down, that's the hard part. But especially getting rid of energy cards. The problem I see with that is finding those two cards. There's no way to actually search when you really need it, except for maybe Luminion. But I feel like you just don't want to
Yeah.
use Luminion to find
Yeah,
your
it's
Geo.
like Urshifu lists are playing Luminion, so it is
Yes.
a combo they can reasonably pull off. The
Mm-hmm.
Spiritomb is searchable,
Right.
and like Giacomo is like,
Yeah.
technically searchable,
Right.
even though you'd prefer not to.
Right.
But like you can, and there's certain spots where you'd want to,
Mm-hmm.
especially if Lugia is like over attaching, like it can
Right.
really like set them back quite a bit. And honestly, like it kind of makes the combo a little bit better
Yeah.
because Lugia is one of your more questionable matchups, and
Mm-hmm.
Mew is definitely your most questionable matchup as that deck. So the
Oh yeah.
combo itself is pretty good. The only problem, I personally kind of have with it is the deck list is really tight as is,
Yeah.
and in order to like fit both those cards in, you're gonna have to cut like the combination of like energy search, heavy ball, and echoing horn. Like two of those three are gonna have to go. Nothing else is particularly notable on the list.
Yeah, and they're so good in that list. Honestly, it fixes more matchups than Giacomo and Spiritomb does to have those cards. So you're going down in consistency to just bring up one bad matchup. And I almost think that it's just not right to tech for one bad matchup, right? Unless you think it's like 30% of the meta or something
It
like
does
that.
sort of cover two, but like I do really think cutting
Yeah.
heavy ball when like a heavy part of your strategy does rely on yoga looping and
Yes.
using Alakazam. And when you're playing two Rota too, like you really can get them out of the prizes when you want to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you can also just like naturally draw them or like play the game without them, but like I really don't find that too appealing. And
No.
also, if you're adding in Spiritomb, you're adding another third one of that's like fairly important. And I feel like cutting heavy ball is like just not great there.
Right.
And I feel like not pulling an energy search or like even like a letter of encouragement is probably like bad.
Mm-hmm.
And like not playing echoing horn, especially when like people are gonna be playing like even if it might not perform exceptionally well, like people are gonna be playing Charizard and like decks with Pidgeot.
Yeah.
And these are like 60 HP basics that like you can really easily exploit with Urshifu. I think not
Right.
playing Horn is like almost certainly a mistake too.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, like I think you can get away without the heavy ball, but like I'd really prefer not to. It's quite sketchy.
Yeah.
Um,
So another tech that I want to talk about, and it's something that we've kind of tested a little bit more too, is going backwards to Gardevoir and some of the techs that you can add in for this specific meta. Honestly, because I think Urshifu is a good play, and some of the decks that we are testing, like Giratina, I think that both stones in the deck, Forest Seal Stone and Sky Seal Stone, have kind of been something I've seen a little bit more of, a little bit on the uptick. I know that Forest Seal Stone, obviously the better card to have multiple, but I do see the merit where people are trying that out. I do see the merit in going back to maybe the multiple worker build, so you are able to get out from underneath path a little bit easier. So those are some things that I've personally seen. I'm not a Gardevoir player. I think the deck is very good. Maybe we switch on to it, but Tyler, what do you think as far as techs in Gardevoir? Something that you've either tested yourself or things that you're seeing as a trend?
so like I'm not too much a Gardevoir player either myself, but I did play it for like a challenge recently.
Mm-hmm.
Went 4-0 at it. Like it wasn't particularly a very hard challenge or anything like that, but I did play Gardevoir. I tried like I built the list like 15 minutes before the tournament started. But I did play like I've always thought Sky Seal Stone's really good in the deck, but just having like one out to your Sky Seal Stone when it's only good like versus a narrow amount of decks, and you're relying on drawing into this single copy
Mm-hmm.
with no other way to search it in time on schedule, like versus the specific decks that it's good against, just like
Mm-hmm.
it's always seemed like fairly unappealing. And if you're gonna play a version with multiple Vs and you want to play a Sealstone,
Mm-hmm.
like Forest is kind of it's good all the time. It's good whenever you draw it, really.
Yeah.
But now that like Town Store is a stadium that is like legal, I think playing both is actually like a very viable option. Like that 1-1 split of them, because you're basically giving yourself um two outs to each, without like with less prize protection, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
like you're giving yourself two outs to each, like one of like naturally drawing it and one of drawing the Town Store for
Right.
each. Um, and Town Store also happens to be a stadium, so it's just a natural path counter, which is like the deck's biggest issue.
Yeah.
So like the combination of those things is kind of like running three cards and like using what would generally take four slots, you're like fitting it in three slots.
Yeah.
And I find that to be like quite appealing. especially because Guardians of the deck were like all the stadiums for it are like pretty okay, but like none of them are like exceptional. Like you definitely want to collapse. Um, like everything else is kind of like I could play that, but like I don't really like know like if that's what I want to be playing or not.
Yeah.
So like having one of your stadiums be town store, I think is totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, especially like it's just a path counter, and it can get you either stone. Like it's good, and it can also like help you thin. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you like already use your other stone and you draw a town store, like play town
Yeah.
store, like get the stone you haven't used and refinement in the way, or just get it out of the deck, even if you don't have refinement
Right.
available.
For a later Iono or some play like that, you're just trying to get to the bottom cards, maybe get to your boss's orders on the following turn, things like that. I can definitely see that, and I've seen a trend of a 1-1-1 split where Artisan is one of the three stadiums that you're playing, where I don't really agree with Artisan in the deck as much because it also a lot of the time gives an opponent an advantage. And it's just I understand where you want to start the setup really good on your first turn and play Artisan, or maybe try to get out one of your Pokemon that are single prizes. But yeah, I think that Town Store is a card just by itself that we'll see a little bit more of than we thought. And honestly, that's my hot take here. I even saw a meme online that somebody was playing. Stoutland V with with Town Store, where you could get the gloves for whatever matchup you're playing against and just take the double prize turn, which I think is still a meme, but I had to mention it regardless. But yeah, Gardevoir utilizing that card, I think it is going to be really good. I honestly think that regardless of what type of item card or tool card you're using in your Gardevoir deck, that you could definitely use Town Store as one of your main stadiums for the list.
Yeah. Also, just like it also like enables you to play some other like tools that maybe you wouldn't play before. Like I haven't really explored that aspect of it at all, but
Hmm.
like pretty sure like Henry Brand's list that won our regionals last year had like a choice belt.
Yeah.
I don't think that's correct, but like maybe it is. Like
Yeah.
maybe you play like one Steelstone and a choice.
Hmm.
I don't like I don't know. I think there is room to explore with Town Store though,
Oh yeah.
outside of just Steelstones in that deck. Just because it's nice like because like none of the stadiums are very great, and it's a path counter, and it
Hmm.
like opens up like viable options.
Yeah.
It also like the town store turns some hands into bricks that normally like you just wouldn't be playable. Like if you have Ultra Ball and Town Store, you can Ultra Ball there's option, like Town Store Steelstone, like get VIP, and just get a couple of rolls on board at
Hmm.
minimum. Like it just like kind of like is another way of rookie starts.
Yep.
Where it's like Arizona, I feel like Arizona, like it's just it is increased consistency because you're getting a basic, like it can't help, but like it's really only good for Guardy if you're drawing that turn one,
Right.
which doesn't feel like very great. Like it does boost consistency to a degree, but like it also a lot of decks I feel like just get more use out of Artisan.
Hmm.
And if you can't like get rid of your own Artisan fast, like they may just be able to like abuse it and get way more value out of it than you can.
Right.
Um, I also don't think double worker builds are a thing anymore. I don't think it's very good. I think if you're playing pad, playing one worker is probably fine. I think playing two worker is probably bad. I think you can't really play three stadium with two worker. You kind of have to play two and two.
Hmm.
And like having a lot of your path counters like be tied to like having that half of your support for the turn, like leaves you like little room to like Iono yourself into a counter. Because like ioning into a worker, you obviously can't bump the path, and like you just like effectively just if that was a stadium, you would have bumped the path and do something.
Right. Right.
Where I think one worker is fine if you're playing pad because like technically it can remove two paths, so that's fine. But I think playing more than one is like almost certainly a mistake.
Hmm. I could see that. Um, we're, we're still talking about Path here, and one of the decks that I feel really doesn't care about Path at all, that we've also been testing, and I'm not even sure if it's really good into the meta, but I've seen it do really well at cups and challenges throughout quarter 0 and into quarter 1, where we are now post Worlds, is Palkia VSTAR, and that's a deck that we kind of we were on for a bit. It was great, and now it's kind of going under the radar. So I don't know if that's something that we'll see. What are your thoughts on Palkia V-Star for the weekend here, Tyler?
The only problem, like, I see with it is, like, it does just, like, straight up lose to Charizard. Like, the more, like, Charizard, like, Arceus, like, Pidgeot builds,
Mm-hmm.
like, it, like, really has no route to winning that game almost all the time.
Yeah.
And, like, I don't expect it to be, like, incredibly high meta share, but, like, it will be present.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, it's not even a deck where it's, like, you can kind of, like, hit two Zars and clean them up with Greninja later because of like random Terra ability they have
Mm-hmm.
for some reason. So you kind of just like lose the Zard because you can't really one shot anything besides like their early game when they're low HP Pokemon,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're like likely one shotting you. Like after three prizes, like Vitality Man puts you in Charizard KO range. Like you just like lose the Charizard straight up if they do anything.
Yeah.
Which like seems like not ideal. It's not even like you can boss like kill Pidgeot or boss kill
Yeah.
uh Arceus V-Star because like that's also out of your kill range. It's just like the matchup's incredibly awkward. It does not they don't play a lot of switching cards. Like sometimes they're only playing one.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're playing two with Pidgeot, they're likely going to be able to like get out of any like Articuno like
Yeah.
shenanigans. And it just seems like too bad of a matchup to accept. It like also just struggles just like versus a few decks that are like relevant. It's like it struggles against Tina.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely struggles against Miradon.
Right.
Which I don't know how high meta share it's going to be, but it's definitely like a deck that like should be on your radar at least.
I think people will go into Pittsburgh saying, I like to play Pokemon cards, but I don't want to think for 9 rounds. So let's play Miraidon. And that's okay. And I get that. People just want to go to have fun at the end of the thing. Not everybody else is a CP grinder. So I do think that there's going to be that chance where maybe you're on your winning in for day 2 and you hit a Miraidon. And you need to know that you have a good matchup against those type of decks. And I think that that's kind of where it's scary playing a Palkia deck, because they also play Path now too in a lot of the Miraidons, specifically after the Worlds run of Andrew Mahone coming in 21st place with the Path of the Peak build. And I think that more players who are playing Miraidon are generating towards that higher Path count because Path is so strong. So yeah, I love playing Palkia. I think Palkia is a strong deck. I think Articuno really helps the deck in a lot of bad spots, but is it the play? I'm going to go with probably not. Lost City is really cool in that deck and has a lot of good plays. I think Raihan is a card that we didn't really talk about too much in that list, but I think Raihan, if you're playing Palkia, you should probably play one of those in the list. I've seen some Japanese lists online cut the Raihan. I don't really agree with that, but that's just my personal take. But another deck that you really touched on a lot in that conversation, Tyler, is Charizard. Let me get your thoughts on Charizard EX. Are we going to see a lot of it? Are we not going to see a lot of it? Do people trust in it, or do they just want to play Charizard to play a Charizard deck?
I honestly don't have much of a clue. I think it'll be higher than 5%,
Mm-hmm.
but less than 10%.
Okay.
I think I don't think it'll be like a Zard Fest. Although I do think there certainly will be some.
Mm-hmm.
And mostly like the Arceus Zard variant, which like uh, it's fine if everything goes well. Like it's pretty insane, but like every single card in the deck is bad against half. Like quite literally every single card.
Yeah.
So it just seems like a deck that is just like too one-dimensional and like just loses to like path hand disruption at some point.
Right.
And like if you can kind of play around the Zard killing like V-Star Pokemon the same way you can play around Roxanne to a
Right.
degree with certain decks. Um, because they can only kill like Tina V-Star, for example.
Mm-hmm.
If you're taking 3 prize cards and they have at least a vitality band attached.
Right.
So if you take 2 and like start playing around it a little bit, like they just have a real hard time. And I think if you're gonna like have a hard time versus Path in general, which is played pretty heavily, and the likely highest meta share deck playing Path and playing ways to get like kind of exploit your like prizing strategy is like fairly problematic and not very good. I think the Law Zone Charizard EX decks, I think all the lists I've seen are pretty horrific. I'm not sure how great the deck is,
Yeah.
but it is like I find it incredibly intriguing, and like I do want someone to make a good list and do well with that
Yeah.
because that is something like but like I've like looked at a lot of lists for it, and all of them I found quite atrocious. And like I just like don't know how to fix it, so I haven't bothered.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
it's like a worse uh Sablezard with a bigger HP Pokemon. Yes, I get it. But you also get to play Greninja, which is the upside. But the downside is consistency. Fitting a 101 line or 202 of a Charizard, it's just screaming inconsistencies to me.
well, it's usually a 303.
Yeah.
With free candy.
Yeah.
I personally would like if I was running the deck, I would just be playing 4 candy, and like it also is weak to path as
Yes.
well.
Yep.
So like it's another problem, but it's kind of like to me the way the deck lists have been going, it just seems like Kmart Lost Tina, where like it does set up itself, I guess, with the rare candy, but like Mirage Gate also like so, and you can do that independent of Lost Zone, which is the
Yeah.
one benefit.
Right.
But you do need the combo of Charmander, Charizard, candy. And Charmander has 60 HP.
Yeah.
So if you're not evolving quick enough, you have a very exploitable number. And with Horn, you have a very exploitable number.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like rare candy, like you can rare candy very early and like start swinging, but like Charizard's not even that great of an early swinger. Like 180 is not like
Right. It's nothing.
doing very much in this format. Like you're two-shotting and they're two-shotting you in return.
Right.
And like you don't really want to be doing that with your Zard.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that's cool about the deck is like if you are going to build a more consistent version and just run Radzard, you can Radzard very early game.
Right.
And like with a belt, you can just like be killing like Lugias and like whatever with Radzard early. Like yeah, that version is like very inconsistent, but like I could see that drawing incredibly well and just like
Yeah.
people play one.
One card that I thought to maybe increase consistency, and I know that it's a bad card because you also generally have to play a Bibarel engine to make this work, is playing a Peony in an Arc Pidgeot Zard list, so you can get your rare candy and maybe a Lost Vacuum to bump the path. But again, you're getting rid of your candy with your Lost Vacuum generally in that scenario. So it's still a bad card, but I could see some people attempting to try to tech for something like that. But you could essentially, if you had a Bibarel setup, you could Peony, find a candy and a vacuum, use your Bibarel, Lost Zone one of your cards, get the path out of play, then use your Pidgeot to find whatever evolution you need, or so on and so forth, and go from there. So there is merit to maybe building something like that, but I think that it's a real stretch. And if we do see something do well, it's going to be somebody that really wanted to craft the list and come out of nowhere with a list that we probably have not seen yet. So I really think that that's cool if it happens, but I would be surprised if it did.
And I think a deck that's like been like underplayed, I guess, and been underperforming in general Single Strike Lugia, which I
Yeah.
think is actually going to be like either like the best play or one of the better plays for Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Because like meta wise, it's incredibly well positioned. Um, it's like even versus Lost Box decks, you're becoming more and more favored because like more and more like turbos are cutting Raikou in favor of Pidgeot because no one's playing Lugia, and like Pidgeot is an easy way to enable Seal Stone. I think it's a bad use of the slot. The deck needs more attackers. But like a lot of people are running the Pidgeot, and it may be better in the Kyogre versions. But like with playing three and on Lugia, like I think there's a pretty good chance they won't get to Kyogre a lot of the time, and like you're just gonna beat them because they can't one shot your Lugia because they don't have Raikou, and they can't one shot your T-Tar if you put a V guard on it because Dragonite's swinging for 250
Right.
into something that needs 260 to kill. So like you can't one shot anything in their deck. They're now playing multiple collabs. So like you can't even reliably clean it up. Like they're playing Rad Cyrano, so you can't like 60-60 on Archeops and then Greninja for kill. Like it's just like the deck seems like it just beats Lost Box really bad right now.
Right. And it's got a great Gardevoir matchup too.
Yeah, it's got a good Gardevoir matchup. It's got a really good Mew matchup.
It's got a decent Arceus matchup for people who think that that's going to be a thing.
Yeah, it's got like it's probably like at least 55-45 versus pretty much every Arceus deck.
Right.
Besides Ardura, where they wanted to play, if you're not playing Urshifu, which you probably aren't. Like you quite literally just lose by them putting the Dura in play.
Yeah.
The Dura is like terrible versus quite literally everything else right now. So I wouldn't really worry about Dura.
Listen, if I see Dura at the top tables, I'm just I'm walking out at that point. Because I mean I wouldn't believe it. So that kind of transitions well. I want to kind of get your take on a few final questions here before we close things out on the meta. I'll give mine first, and then I want to hear yours. But basically, this is the spicy deck section of all of these meta forecasts. Is what deck do you think will do well in day one that you wouldn't expect, and what deck do you think is going to make top 8 that you wouldn't expect to see in top 8? So I think that for spicy decks, I think really what we're going to see maybe at the top tables doing well, I don't know if it'll convert well after the day 2, is I really do think that we will see some form of single prize deck come out of here, whether it's something that's been able to dodge and weave. Maybe there's a Snorlax build out there that we necessarily haven't seen. Maybe there's a control variant that's more single prize reliant that we'll see. I think that will do good day 1 if it hits the right matchups. And then in top 16, I would say that we might even see a colorless Lugia, and that's just based off of what I've seen from online results. I would be very surprised if it happened, but I think that it could potentially happen. So if there's a colorless Lugia player out there that really wants to roll the dice this weekend, maybe now's your time. So those are the 2 builds that I kind of have little faith in. Again, I would be super surprised, but what do you think that you'll see do well day 1 that's a spicy take or a spicy deck, and what do you think you'll see in top 16, Tyler?
Well, it's not really a spicy take, I suppose, but I think Single Strike Lugia will overperform to a significant degree. Like I mean, like it's clearly been a deck for a while, and it was like a tier 1 deck for a while. It's fallen quite out of favor, I guess. You see very little results with it. But it's like incredibly well meta positioned. I think it will like overperform its meta share by a significant amount. And I think as a result, other decks I don't see Mew as being as much of a factor as you do, because I think Lugia will be overperforming, which beats Mew. Charizard's like a natural Mew counter. Mew just won World, so people are like sweating Mew right now. They're more likely to be winning Mew counters. I just think Mew is like it's a deck that can always win every event, and I do expect the Mew to be in top 8. But I don't think it will like see like wide success. Like there's always just like one random Mew in top 8. It just always happens. Like I think like the most random deck that I think is likely the top 8 is like Rapid Strike.
Okay.
Like I think top 8 looks something like 2 Tina, 2 Guardy, like 1 like Turbo, 1 Single Strike, Lugia, 1 Rapid Strike, and like 1 Fusion Mew.
Okay.
Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see a Lost Zone Charizard EX deck do well. But I don't think one will end up placing very high.
Yeah. That it would be cool to see something crazy like that, or even I think Alex had that Vengeful Punch Lost Zone box. I think that's
I do think the Vengeful Punch box is like it is a thing, and that is a real deck. It's not a deck that like I've tested enough to want to run, and I don't think it is like the optimal Lost box, but I do think it's a real deck.
Oh yeah,
and like it's not like a meme or anything. Like you have to know how to play against it, or it's gonna like, or you're gonna like run into it, and it's gonna beat you.
Yeah, somebody is calling it Melamar spell tags at home is the deck. So
yeah, like sometimes you're gonna have to walk into it, and you're gonna get like something like Big Crab, or like Snorlax is gonna be able to kill your like 108, like your 220 HPB because like they're 40 and Snorlax hits you dead.
Yeah, it can set you up. You know, we were talking about Snorlax. Honestly, Snorlax is probably my favorite card of the current meta right now. I know you and I have been going back and forth on what matchup Snorlax fits into, but I think in that deck specifically, you know, if you're able to set up, you're right, the 180 damage, Vengeful Punch is on there. You're putting another 40 damage counters on maybe a V-Star or V-Max. The next turn you're hitting with Sableye. Sableye's knocking out that Pokemon and setting up the next 2 prize Pokemon for another knockout. I think that's really good. Big Crab, you're right, can come out of nowhere no matter what. You know, you put 4 damage counters on something, and then you put Crab out and you gate to it. I think that's a really good strategy in a lot of
Crab gate, or just like even like just setting up with Sableye, like if they're like refusing to walk into it, and like they're like playing kind of like a suboptimal line trying to play around it.
Yeah.
Like you have time to like Sableye spread damage around, so like Crab can go like rewind kill. I think it's like the and I think Vengeful Punch actually makes Snorlax a lot better, because like with Choice Ball before you're getting 210, which is counting many of these, it's like not that relevant a number, and you're not very happy with hitting for 210. But if you can make them like walk into 40 damage and then get hit by 180, it is much more relevant. And like I think that is a deck to not ignore, and it is a good build. I don't know if it's the optimal like way to play the deck, but it is like definitely a like for real build. Like it is a deck you should like at least know how to play against.
Yeah.
And like know what you're gonna be walking into with it, because like it's not like a meme.
No, it's definitely not. So I'm gonna close things out here with one final question. I mean, for me, it's one of 2 different cards, but the MVP, the card you should be most scared of going into Pittsburgh Regional, I'm gonna say Roxanne. You know, I think Roxanne is probably the biggest card that you have to be scared of going into this format, into this tournament. People need to know how to play around Roxanne or have some sort of comeback to Roxanne. So Tyler, would you agree with that, or do you think that there's maybe a better card that people should be afraid of?
I think Roxanne is really strong, especially if they're playing path. Like, but I think like literally Sableye is the best card in the format, and like I think just any deck that's playing Sableye is like pretty heavily advantaged over most decks. So I would just like actually be most afraid of Sableye, because like even like Charizard Pidgeot, like if like you're playing against Turbo and you're not evolving quickly, Like, you're just gonna get Sableye double killed on like a Charmander, like Charmander, Pidgey Pidgey, Charmander Pidgey, just anything. So they're playing Horn, they can bring something back. It's just like Sableye just punishes so many decks, and especially in turbo variants, you can punish them much faster. Like Tina, like it's a slower developing Sableye, like it's not happening as fast, so it's not as punishing. But Sableye just like stops a lot of decks from like existing at all, or like they can play them, but like have to just hope they like play everything besides Sableye decks. I think Sableye is just the best card and will remain the best card for quite a while.
Absolutely. Yeah, it keeps one of my favorite decks out of the format completely, which is the Zoroark box deck. But that's very unfortunate. But I think that you're right. Sableye is definitely another card to be afraid of this weekend, especially for people who know how to play Sableye very well. If you can't beat Sableye and you can't beat Roxanne, you probably should consider a different deck before you head into the tournament this weekend. So make sure that you're submitting your deck lists accordingly. But hopefully anything that we said resonated with you, and you can take that information with you into Pittsburgh Regional, and maybe you'll do a little bit better than you would have had you not listened to this episode here of the Meta Forecast on the Shuffle Squads channel. But Tyler, where can anybody find you outside of here on this video in the wild?
I mean, currently I'm quite literally only on Twitter, which is like at Tyler's, of course, my name, or like Tyler's TCG on Discord, and I have that Twitch name reserved, but there's nothing there for you. So.
Not yet, right? So, and as well, you can always find me here on the Shuffle Squads channel, or via Twitter, or X, as the kids are calling it now. But you can find me on there, and you can find both of us, as well as the remainder of the team, too, over on Metafy.gg. You can use the /TSS win, and you'll pull all of us up for coaching sessions if you want to get a little bit better at Pokemon TCG, or possibly even VGC coming up too. So as far as the podcast or the meta share goes here, this is all we have to say for now, but we'll catch you over at Pittsburgh Regional. We're signing off now, but we'll catch you next time on the Shuffle Squad.
You made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching this entire video from the Shuffle Squad. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate each and every person that supports our content, watches what we have going on every single day, every single week, even from time to time, and continuously allows us to have a forum to project our creative content towards the Pokemon TCG community. So if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, we'll catch you with our next video. Thanks again. Take it easy.